Hello, and today we're going to be reviewing the EverStart Maxx Lite. It's a rechargeable folding work light with a magnetic base. So let's go ahead and get started. And first up, we have the hanging hook. The hanging hook is located at the base of the tool and will unfold when you need to use it. The hook itself is made out of a plastic, which is fairly flexible in warmer temperatures, but I would definitely be careful in colder temperatures because, well, the type of plastic that they're using is that kind of plastic that is really flexible in warmer conditions, and as soon as it gets cold, it gets super brittle and will break easily. So overall, the plastic that they're using is not the best choice, but at least they include a hook, although I personally would have made it out of metal. Overall, the design is, well, a fairly simple design. You just unfold it and that's about the only movement you have. There's no pivoting or rotating, so what you get is what you get. Now, the hinge that it's hooked into is a fairly, well, poorly designed. The fact is that the hinge could have had a recessed design and still been completely functional, and it would have protected whatever surface you have the light attached to. But because it sticks out, there's a decent chance you could leave a scratch when removing or setting the light up. So at the end of the day, this is a bad design, and I really think they should have thought a little bit more before implementing it. But with that being said, let's move on. Okay, next up we have the magnetic base. The magnetic base is located at the bottom of the light and features 3 small rare earth magnets behind a plastic cover. Overall, I do think this was the proper design to go with because when you have one large magnet, there's a decent chance that you could cause a bend or a dent on a surface of, say, a car or a thin metal filing cabinet or something like that. So quite frankly, I think this was the right design to go with. Now, I'm not a huge fan of the fact that the base of the tool doesn't have any, well, sort of soft rubberized texture. There's a hard rubberized seal or gasket or trim at the base of the tool, and that really is about it. And it really is a hard rubberized texture and not a soft one, which would be preferable for protecting the surface of whatever you have it mounted on. Now, when it comes to the strength of the magnets, the magnets do a good job as long as they're mounted on a flat surface. If there's any sorts of, well, gaps or areas that are not flat, and there's a decent chance the light could fall off, as you can see in the video. And I would definitely not use this light on anything that is producing vibrations, such as a moving vehicle or heavy machinery that is running, because, well, quite frankly, the magnets are not strong enough to keep it in place in those conditions. They're really only to be used for, well, mounting this on, say, the side of a shipping container that's not on a moving vehicle, or maybe on your water heater, or possibly inside your car's engine compartment when it's turned off. So yeah, moving on. And next up we have the grip. Now the grip on this particular light, while I would love to say is fantastic, absolute best ever, that would be a blatant lie. Quite frankly, the grip on this particular light has very many shortcomings and pretty much no positives. Quite frankly, it's atrocious. So, what are the issues? Well, the main issue would probably be the fact that the buttons are easily accidentally pressed, meaning that you'll switch your modes or actually turn on features you didn't want to turn on, meaning that there's a good chance that your battery life will die much quicker than expected or will be completely dead when you need to use the light. That would probably be the biggest issue. The second biggest issue would be the fact that, well, it's short. The grip on this particular light is incredibly small, considering that it's made for adults. If you're a kid, it'll probably fit you just fine, or if you just have smaller sized hands, it might work for you. But if you're an individual that has medium to large sized hands, you're probably going to be rather uncomfortable with just the size of the grip. Another issue that this light has would probably be the quality of rubber they decided to go with. Quite frankly, the rubber that they decided to go with reminds me more of, well, let's say maybe a rock rather than rubber. Well, maybe hard plastic rather than rubber. Quite frankly, it's incredibly uncomfortable, and there's not a whole lot of it, and it just isn't all that great, to be perfectly frank. So, at the end of the day, I'm not a fan of it. So, when you add up all those complaints, there really is nothing good about the grip on this tool. Let's move on. And next up we have the power button. The power button is located on the body of the tool within the gripping area, which is a bad location, as I previously mentioned. Overall, the power button itself is it's a hard plastic button, which is slightly recessed, but not enough to actually do anything. And quite frankly, it's as basic as it gets. Your first mode is going to be your high mode for the torch or the spotlight or flashlight, followed by the low mode for that spotlight or torch, and then followed by the area light, and then the area light plus the torch mode on high, and then the off position. And there is a fifth mode where you have to press and hold the button for about 5 seconds, and then the light will start flashing slowly, and that could be useful in an emergency situation, but for me, I don't really ever need that function, so let's just go ahead and keep talking about the overall button. The button is, well, in a bad location, the materials that it's made out of is bad, and, well, quite frankly, it needs some improvements here. And it's also kind of wiggly or jiggly in its port, so, quite frankly, I think it needs improvement. Let's move on. And next up, we have the USB port. Now, this particular USB-A port is going to be how you charge your devices such as your phone, run a small fan, if you so choose to, with the internal power that this light is able to provide. This is actually also how you charge the light itself, which is actually really freaking amazing. I've never seen this particular feature on any other device ever. A USB-A charging port. As in, this is how you charge the light, is via the USB-A port. There's no micro USB, there's no USB-C, there's no barrel plug. You charge this light with a USB-A port, which is just weird. Now, unfortunately, there's some cons here with this port as well. One con is you can't really charge your phone or run a small USB fan off the port and use the light at the same time because, well, when you go to cycle through the modes, the only mode that you'll be able to access is, well, the spotlight low mode, and that's just not all that useful. Another downside is, well, you can't really charge the light itself and, well, use it at the same time. What happens is when you turn the light on while it's charging, it will stop charging. There's no other way of putting it. That's just a stupid design choice and really a major disappointment and honestly a deal breaker considering the price point. But with that being said, let's move on. And next up we have the USB charging mode button. In order to engage the charging mode on this particular light, you're going to have to press this button and it will show you an indication of what's going on with the tool. If it's a solid blue, that means that the battery is full and you're good to go. If it's a flashing blue, that means you have it plugged in and it's charging. If it's a solid red, that means it's operating under partial voltage. And if it is flashing red slowly, that means that it's getting close to no voltage and it needs to be recharged. If it's flashing red rapidly, that means that the light has overheated or possibly has no voltage whatsoever. So either way, you're kind of, well, screwed in that circumstance. So at the end of the day, the charging mode button does have a purpose, but it's in a bad location and I'm just not a huge fan of the charging function on this light to begin with because the internal battery is sort of on the small side. It'll work good for giving your phone an emergency charge, but other than that, I really don't see very many practical uses in using it because when you have it turned on, it pretty much renders the light worthless. But not 100% worthless. I'm just saying that there's better options on the market if you want to charge a USB device. With that being said, let's move on. And next up we have the tilting head hinge. The hinge for the tilting head is located behind the light panels and is made out of plastic. Now, there are supposed to be positive stops. I believe they're located at the 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock, 11 o'clock, and 12 o'clock positions. But unfortunately on mine, only 3 of those positions, the 12 o'clock, 10 o'clock, and 9 o'clock positions, were working consistently, with the 11 o'clock position working only every once in a while. But since I have started using this light and since I started this video, all the positions have since stopped working, although the light will stay wherever I put it on the tilt angle. It just doesn't, well, click into place like on any of those positions that it used to. So quite frankly, it is starting to malfunction. I'm not sure if I just got a bad copy. I kind of doubt it looking at just the overall build quality of the light to begin with, or maybe it's just a bad design, which is what I actually think is the issue. Quite frankly, the build quality when it comes to this light is really lacking. It is a very usable light when it comes to just the amount of light it's putting out, but the build quality is definitely not there. So while it's still usable without those positive positions that have stopped working, it really is a sign of just how low quality this light is. And I mean that by the build quality. The amount of light and the quality of the light it puts out is actually fairly good. But with that being said, let's move on. And next up we have the light panels. Now the light panels on this particular light are made out of plastic with a clear plastic cover that goes over the LED beads. There are 6 LED beads arranged in a 2x2x2 pattern on each panel, and there are 3 panels. Overall, the light output is actually fairly decent, and I don't really have any complaints when it comes to just how much light this light is putting out, and it does a good job of illuminating a workspace. So quite frankly, I'm perfectly satisfied with the color of the light and the amount of light that this particular light is putting out. Where I'm not as thrilled is probably the hinges that the light panels attach to the main body of the tool with. They work fine in a stationary position, but your really only two viable options are when the panels have been fully unfolded or when they have been folded up. And that kind of brings us to another point on these panels. They don't really lock into position in any position. When they fold up, they're basically held in place by a bump on the bottom of the light panel, which goes onto a little cutout on the body of the tool, and that's how it keeps it in place. There's no actual locking mechanism, so if you're running or if you're driving in a vehicle, there's a good chance it could vibrate loose and you'll get a floppy light panel, which is not ideal for many circumstances. So overall, quite frankly, while the panels are completely satisfactory to me, I really wish a little bit more design had went into the actual mechanics behind them. The light quality is good, but the mechanics on how they operate are, well, a little bit lacking or incomplete in my opinion. And last but not least, we have the spotlight. The spotlight is located at the top of the light and is powered by a single LED bead. The LED bead's temperature is slightly warmer than the panel light's temperature, and overall is going to be noticeable, but not so much so that it's annoying. It's just something that you'll, well, notice when you're using it. Overall, the spotlight definitely isn't going to be the focal point of this particular tool. I'd say it's fairly comparable to the Makita 18 volt light that I reviewed a while back, at least when it comes to the amount of area that it's illuminating. But at the end of the day, I probably would actually end up using the spotlight on this over the Makita because I like the color of the temperature better. And it just is going to be a better light for, well, multiple reasons when it comes to illuminating a work area as well. So, what's my final verdict on the spotlight? It's not the best, it's not the worst. It's a spotlight, and it gets the job done. The bread and butter is definitely the light panels and the magnetic base, but it is a nice feature to have. Although I personally would have traded it for having a bigger battery. But that's just me. Okay, now with that being said, let's go ahead and move on to the weight of the tool and some pros and cons after that. The light weighs 385 grams, which is a little under a pound. Okay, this video is starting to get long, so let's go through the pros and cons real quick. Even light. Overall, when the light is in the floodlight mode, the light is very even, and this is very helpful for when you're working in a close environment or in a tight space. Floodlight and spotlight. Overall, having both in one device is a very nice feature to have, and overall is very useful and hard to find, so this is a pro in my opinion. USB charger. The USB charger can be helpful in a variety of different situations, and it will be incredibly helpful if you need to charge your phone in an emergency situation. Tilting head. While I may not like the overall build quality, the tilting head is incredibly useful and will help you out in a variety of different situations, especially if you're working in a tight environment and you have something that you can magnetically attach this light to. Compact. Overall, this is a fairly compact light considering how much light it can put out. So overall, I would definitely consider it to be a pro. Magnetic base. Overall, the magnetic base works just fine for a stationary object, which is what I needed it for, and overall I'm perfectly satisfied. So as far as I'm concerned, the magnetic base is perfectly satisfactory on this light, and so it's a pro. And the first meh is runtime. Overall, the runtime on this particular light isn't all that good. You're looking at about an hour with all lights turned on, and about 5.5 hours with it on low mode, with the spotlight. So honestly, that's not a great performance, but it's not as bad as it could be. And the first con is build quality. The build quality is pretty pathetic. There's molding that isn't all that well joined together. There's parts that are made out of plastic that should have been made out of metal, and there's parts and pieces that are already malfunctioning after a couple days of owning it. Honestly, if I hadn't bought it on clearance, I probably would be returning it. But I bought it on clearance and I got it for under 15 bucks, so that's the one reason why I'm hanging on to it. So at the end of the day, the build quality is just pretty pathetic. Small grip. Overall, the grip on this particular light is on the small side, and if you have medium-sized or large-sized hands, you're not going to enjoy the grip. Plastic hook. Overall, the plastic hook is pretty pathetic. It's not absolutely horrible, but at the same time, it really should be made out of metal, and I'm not sure why more companies just can't get through their heads, make things out of metal and not plastic. Well, I know why. It has to do with money, but it just annoys me. And this is probably my biggest issue with this particular light, and that is the switch locations. I don't know whose idea it was to put the switches within the gripping area on the light, but that was just stupid. And it turns the light on accidentally, it turns on the power for the USB charging accidentally, and you can't throw this in a bag because it's going to turn on something accidentally. So overall, the switch location is just abhorrent. And the next con would be the price. Coming in at around $30 to $35, depending on if you buy it in the store or online, it's going to definitely be on the high side. I got mine on clearance for around $13, and I think that was still maybe a little high, but I need a magnetic light, and this somewhat fits the bill, so I'm hanging on to it. And that's it for the pros and cons. Final thoughts on this particular light. Honestly, I really think that the cons outweigh the pros here. I like the quality of light that it's putting out. I like how much light it's putting out. But when you couple it with the build quality, the bad button placement, the small battery, and the fact you can't use it while it's being charged, there's just too many things going against it. If you can find it for under $15, it might be worth picking up, but I definitely wouldn't be paying the full retail price for this particular light, which is a disappointment because I do like the light quality. So with that being said, that's the end of this video. Thanks for hanging with me. This was a rough video for me, and we'll see you next time. God bless.